Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and welcome back to the Audiomo Podcast. Now, it has been almost a month since we have talked to Dave Nelson. We've been having a few other people on, just talking about life, talking about all sorts of things that aren't so specific to gear and that stuff. And tonight, I think I kind of want to go in that direction with you. But first of all, how you doing?
Pretty good. For the knock on wood, not sick. Nobody in the house is sick for a little while after a long time of everybody being sick. So doing good at the moment. How about you?
I'm doing really good. I got a really clean studio behind me. I spent the whole day. We did the whole house, so everything is in order. And I can't stand when things get out of control, messy. It reminds me of college, and there's some good things about college, but there are some really bad things about college. and filth was absolutely something I could not stand. You had your issues with that sometimes at that old house.
Yeah, definitely. But actually, that's funny that you said that. I actually cleaned the studio a couple days ago too, and I rewired, which really made me feel good. Like I got some, I don't know, it's basically like a big tube, but it opens up at the end that you screw into the bottom of the desk, and I needed something bigger that could handle all of the cables that were going, and I finally just was like, you know what? I'm going to pull everything apart and just rewire it the right way, and it just felt really good, you know?
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, we were talking before this. Now, I'm not going to rehash everything that we were talking about because, first of all, we just talked about it. But I did want to talk about a few things that could kind of be expanded upon further without getting into some specific stuff. A lot of people that watch this channel might not be familiar, so to speak, when it comes to the process of once a record is done. Because normally the goal was always get the record done. Make sure the songs are as good as they can be and be happy with it, and everything else, you'll figure it out along the way. But given the way that things have, changed with social media and the need to do a lot of this stuff that you could used to be able to skip out on, it's made it a bit more difficult and a bit more of an involved process. Your record is done. You're happy with it. To me, I'd be like over the moon, but I know what that means coming afterwards. What do you have planned for this, and what are your thoughts about, staying positive about like everything? Because it's not just like the songs at that point. You got to be happy with the video. You got to be happy with the PR. You got to be happy with all this. Like, how do you juggle that and like keep a good attitude?
Yeah, it's a long question and it's a long answer, and I'm not sure that I have the right answer either, right? Like I have things that we do that, help, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff, man. I don't know. You're right. It is like when you're in the process of it, you kind of just think like, oh, we're recording, like we're making great music. Like I know how to do that, like I know how to get into a studio and I know how to work stuff and I know how to, change things and record stuff and get stuff to sound good. Like that part, this is what we live for, right? Like we've been doing this for years, right? But yeah, then you get done and it's like, I think what the most nerve-wracking part about it is how many other hands are now a part of your art, right? Like you said, like we got music video, that's a whole process, right? So there's finding somebody, there's coming up with an idea or, being pitched ideas, which is kind of what happened with this last video. It was like, I think part of maybe what doesn't get talked about a lot is like when you finish an album, like I was just burnt, like totally burnt out on creativity, right? So I was like, I want to go talk to somebody and I want them to pitch me an idea for a music video because I got nothing, right? Like I'm like, we just spent all of our creative juices on this album and I don't want to, try to come up with something again, right? So, and the idea too is that I feel like for me, if I'm involved with something with somebody else, like the concept of me being able to show up with ideas and want to work on stuff makes me more excited about it too. So my thought was like, hey, we'll go do a music video. They'll pitch me an idea. Like it'll be something they really want to work on too. And, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes you have a vision for something and they have a vision for something and it's hard to find that middle ground. So staying positive during that is, I think it's about trying to know that you can get there eventually. I think, and sometimes you can't, and you got to start over. And so that is always an option too, I think. But we can come back to that one because I don't have a good answer on that one. But the other part I will say that I do have fun with is when it goes really well, right? And you get this extra collaboration with people that great stuff comes out of. Like, obviously, I think I've talked about this plenty of times before on the podcast, but I'm a designer by trade, like for work, right? So, you know, when we start talking about like merch and we start doing like new shirt designs and stuff, and I can go out and go like talk to artists and be like, hey, let's come up with cool stuff. Like that stuff is awesome, right? It's like a whole new avenue with a whole different type of creativity that you don't get to hit while you're recording an album. And some of that stuff can be super cool, right? Like, and then you get to think about like all sorts of stuff that just I think are exciting. Like what do your hats look like, and what are your, you know, what's the poster going to look like, all that kind of cool stuff, right? So that's always super fun. And I think like finding fun in that is what kind of pulls you through some of the other businessy stuff, right? Like playlisting, so boring, right? And really it's just like, it's about finding companies, spending a little bit of money and seeing what works, and doing that 50 times until you're like, okay, these are the right guys. And I don't, you know, I mean, I don't even know if that's necessarily the best way to do it, but it's the only way we've figured out to do it at this point. And then I'm trying to think of like what all the other stuff is too. I mean, obviously there's PR that I have no good answer to. We've always lost with PR, but you know, I'm hoping, we've got a good contact with a guy now who, you know, I think really seemed like he knew his stuff. You know, I know you've had bad experience with PR in the past too. Like, I don't know how you deal with some of that stuff without just kind of knowing that it's like, this is out of your hands and you have to deal with what you have to deal with. But sometimes it is pretty debilitating, I think. And that's not a good answer to your question, but I feel like at least being honest about the fact that it's not always fun. And sort of setting a bar to like expect that it's not always fun, is a good thing, you know?
I think it's realistic. And I don't think that it's bad to point out reality, so to speak, because not everything afterwards is fun. I've said before, I don't like merch. I don't like any of the PR stuff. I don't like any of that because I just, like, to me, I'm done the second that the click ends on the last song. And I'm like, I got it. I got it. That's the last part I needed to get. And I clap. I used to go have a beer. Now I clap. And that's it. I'm happy. And I go home and I wait for everything to be sent back to me, approve the mix, and then say, okay, well, I'll wait for the master. The master comes in, and then I'm like, oh, hooray, this is fantastic, whatever. And then everything else kind of figures itself out. But I will say this. When it comes to the music video part of it, I don't think most people really need to spend a lot of money to do that. However, if you do want to do something professional, you've done a few videos that obviously were not done with your iPhone or some guy who's your friend who maybe did some amateur stuff. What was your most fun experience? Which video of yours was your favorite to shoot that you're the most proud of? I'm going to leave a link to it so everybody can watch it down below.
Sure. So we've done a couple, I think, that were fun. And to be honest with you, what's funny about it is that the best ones were the cheapest ones. And it was because it was like, you know, we found a guy who was like, I think he literally had dropped out of high school to like do video stuff, and he was like literally recording clubs and like DJs and stuff or whatever. He had no idea how to do a rock music video at all. Like literally I was behind the camera like pointing at who he needed to be focusing on, like what, you know, I'm like, the solo's happening, like go to the guitar player, you know, like because he hadn't even listened to the track or anything. And like those were super fun. Like we posted up on the beach, or the second one we did was like in a giant white room, and we just jammed out, and he did cool stuff with cool, you know, moves or whatever, and they look great, and they were super cheap. They were like, you know, $300-400, right? Which is insane, right? And then, you know, the worst ones have been the ones that we've spent a bunch of money on. And it's, again, because you're sort of like dropping your art in someone else's hands and sort of saying, I hope our versions of art are going to line up, right? And they haven't. And that's been fine, right? Like everybody works together differently. Unfortunately, these are expensive mistakes to make. But I think if I was saying, you know, if I had to pick one for the most fun, it's probably the Throwing Stones music video. And it's just because he had this little 360 camera kind of before they were like really cool. And he was like throwing it around the room, and it was doing all sorts of weird shit. And that was really cool, right? And, you know, to your point, right? So I think if you have a really good idea and it works with the low quality thing, you can shoot a professional music video like with your phone, right? But the idea has to 100% serve the lack of quality, right? And like, you got to have a really good idea, and it's got to just work. And also, I think this is probably true in it. Like, you ever like see, I don't know. I always feel like comedians make the best, like, everything, right? Like they kind of, in order to like know what's funny, you have to like sort of understand why things aren't funny sometimes too. So like, and it's this sort of magic where it's like you get like the Key and Peele guys, right, where they go from like amazing sketch comedy to like incredible horror movies, but it's because he clearly like understands something about how drama and horror work that made him so funny. And in the same sense, like if you're making cheap music videos, you have to understand what makes a music video really good to make a cheap music video work, which most people who are making cheap music videos don't understand. And it's why we don't try to really do them, because it is so difficult to make a cheap music video and not feel like a shit cheap music video, right? So like, but yeah, I mean, most of like the big ones that we've done have cost like $2,000 to $3,000, right? And I mean, they look good, and I think you can probably talk about whether or not like it could be argued whether or not they hit what we were trying to do, and at the end of the day, we're happy enough with them. It's fine, but like, yeah, the music video part is really tough. But I want to touch on something else you said there. Like, I think it's funny that you have this mentality of like the click finishes and I'm done, which to me is like a employee mentality versus a CEO mentality. Like the reason I like a lot of the stuff afterwards is because I'm a control freak and I feel like I have to be in charge of everything that's happening. Like, and I know that you have that to some degree too, because that's how you handle the YouTube stuff. But I think it's funny that you're able to turn it off for one aspect and not for the other. Like I can't do it like if I had my own YouTube channel, like I would run it as aggressively and ridiculously as I do with the band, right? Like every aspect would have to be, you know what I mean? Like there's no way I would just be like, well, with my YouTube, I record a video and I'm done. You know what I mean?
Well, that's kind of how I am with this. I don't like promote it on Facebook. I don't promote it on Instagram. I don't make any posts. I don't pay for anybody to like, because there's all these additional things I could pay for all this stuff. I could make videos that are very popular and clickbaity all the time and touch on like super topics that I know are going to do good. I don't give a shit. Like I really do this for fun. And going back, I'll kind of explain to you my thought process on why, and you'll actually understand this better than probably anybody else in the whole world. What did I say? The last 4 records I worked on, 3 of them, I did everything except sing. I did everything. And I say that and it looks like I'm angry, but it wasn't so much anger. It was just like by the time it was done recording, I was like, all right, I wrote all the bass, I wrote all the guitars, I wrote all the like whatever, and played the drums, and I did all this myself. Like I don't got anything else. Somebody else can take care of it because I've already like put that much into it. Like, and then in the other instances where I wasn't the one that was doing everything, I was much more in the camp that you were in, where I was just like, I want to hear this. Like, I want to hear, like, why don't we try this in this mixer? Just being a little bit more particular about it. But I really feel like in my specific case, that's why I'm able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get that. And like I said that before too, right? Like that's kind of how I was with the music video, where it was just like, nope, I'm done. Like I'm done being creative. Somebody else be creative for me. But yeah, I definitely can see that. I mean, there are times that I feel that way. And then there are times that you get something back and you're just like, fuck, all right, I guess I got to do it myself because, this is just not where I want it to be. And I truly, I'm sure that we've talked about this before. I truly wish that I could be the kind of person who was just ignorant and happy with everything that happens all the time. I bet life would be a lot easier for me. But, I'm like judgmental and I'm very picky and I have a very high standard. And, it just means that I end up taking on a lot more work than I think I can. And sometimes you're just never really going to be happy with these side relationships that you have to work through at the end of an album, So that being said, I will, in the interest of honesty here, I will say that there have been very few times where I have seen more money equals better version, and it's purely because of the creative to creative part, right? I think you can absolutely find somebody who costs very little that you connect with well and you make great things with, and there can absolutely be times where you spend lots of money and you don't have that connection and the thing you end up doing turns out to be shit, right? And it can go both ways, right? That doesn't mean that I'm saying go out and spend no money because it doesn't matter. Because sometimes, if nothing else, when you spend a lot of money, you are at least getting a level of professionalism that doesn't come with the cheap people, that sometimes it's okay to not have because they're cheap. And sometimes, sometimes it isn't okay, right? So, like, I think in certain areas it's okay to just not spend money. In certain areas, it's you have to spend some money, But that being said, if the relationship isn't correct and you don't think that you get along on the same creative level, it doesn't matter how much money you're going to spend. The thing's probably going to suck.
Fair enough. Why don't we hit on the big picture of this, though? All right. I don't think it matters as much as far as how much money you put into this, or how much money you spend on PR, or how much money you spend to promote your record or film a music video or any of that. I think the best advice that I can give to anybody is to build in your local community and have a lot of people, it's one thing to have people on the internet that come across your stuff and find it. That's awesome. You want that. You want people, sometimes you look at because it shows you the demographics and all this stuff. I'll have people in Germany listening to records I've done, and I'm like, what? I'm like, all of a sudden, this one little city will, there'll be 30 people in there watching it. I'm like, that's so crazy to me. But the best thing that you can do that doesn't cost you anything, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you play or what your aspirations are, the best way to kind of have success and ease this in is to establish that sense of community and have those people really genuinely like you from the ground up. Because if you don't have that baseline first, if you're not putting out all the time to go out and gig and build the relationships with people and let people know who you are and get them to get to know you. Because part of music, you really are, you're selling yourself and you're selling your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. And if you kind of skimp on that part and try and fix it by throwing money at the situation, you could spend $100,000 on a music video. Nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's going to care because nobody knows who you are. But at least if you're starting, because everybody starts from nowhere. Unless you're, the son of a super famous, or son or daughter of a super famous person, in which case you have a head start. But the majority of us, we don't start with a great advantage in that. We're all equal there. So the best thing that you can do is to just build, go out, put in the hard work, and then that will make all of this extra stuff that we're talking about a lot easier for it to try to transition. If it comes out even better, then you have your base, and more people will be more likely to watch it. Because the unfortunate truth is, doing YouTube, I do know this too, and I noticed this because I've had videos where I've made this mistake. If the audio, for example, on YouTube is bad, I could shoot perfect 4K, slow motion, best camera ever. It's getting clicked out by most people because they won't tolerate bad audio.
Yeah.
If somebody is watching your band, if your song is really good, but the video is obtrusively bad, they will click out of that in the same kind of mentality. So it's a balancing act, man. It just sucks. I think that the main thing people should be focused on is not skipping the grunt work, so to speak, first. But the reality is, dude, music videos, they I think the most expensive one I was in was it was $15,000. And I was actually filling in for somebody. I didn't even write any of that stuff. I was just kind of hired on at the last minute. And it was so stressful. There were people just it felt like everyone was just shouting at each other, even though they weren't mad. It was just shouting for 3 full days in Los Angeles. Oh, not fun.
Yeah.
Not fun at all.
Music videos are weird. It's definitely weird. And it's a completely, totally different skill than anything, I think a normal musician is used to. And it's just all strange. There's nothing not strange about it. But I don't know. I think everybody there's at least that minute of I'm doing a movie thing. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
That's definitely
it is
fun.
Cool.
Yeah. But to your point about the local stuff, I definitely agree with you. I think where we've always struggled, and I think where probably everybody struggles, is how do you get past that level, right? We know lots and lots of bands who are great local bands that they go out and they play, maybe once a month or twice a month or whatever, and they bring a halfway decent crowd with them, right? And it's usually us other bands that play with them and their friends and stuff like that too, right? And maybe a few fans, right? But it's mostly this kind of group of people who are just sort of all supporting each other, and they all like each other and they're friends, and we all go to the shows together because we all play shows together or whatever. But it's it's the next step from that. That's I think is the hardest one to kind of get past, you know. And I mean, I wish I could be here and be like, I've got the secret, because if I did, I would have used it already. But you know, that's why we do the stupid shit that costs money, and that's why we do the stupid shit of sitting on a set for 3 days thinking like, if I just have the right music video and we just do the right Spotify playlisting, you know, then we'll be able to finally build on this thing and get bigger and badder out of it or whatever. And, you know, if I do figure out the secret, I will come back on the podcast and you lovely listeners will be the first ones to hear it. But I don't know what it is. But, you know, to your point, there's no way it happens without at least that first chunk. So you have to at least do that part, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say things are so different now because you can't compare pre-2020 to now. But one way that did work, it was not fun, but it did work if you went out and did it. And unfortunately now, for people like us that do have families, that you're not going to be able to lift your job, the best way, if you're young enough and you can still do it, is to pick a starting point and a landing point. I don't care if this landing point is only 6 hours away from you. All right? Or you want to go all the way down like a coast. Like say you're in the Northeast, like Dave is. Dave's up in the Northeast of the United States. Say go to Florida, which is the bottom of the United States. Even if you could just book 6 or 7 shows in little bars, whoever will have you where you know that there will be people, as far as like, I mean, it's cool to play like dive bars here and there, but like anywhere that will have you, that you know that you can because you can look up all this stuff. You used to be able to do, especially in Southern California. You could be like, all right, that people actually go see that. It's not like open mic night, because you wouldn't want to be traveling in a van with people to go be playing like open mic stuff. But even if it's barely paying anything, that I would rather eat the cost on that, because you're still gonna lose thousands of dollars here, just like you're gonna lose thousands of dollars if you professionally shoot a music video. But the difference is, you get so much more out of that, as far as, first of all, you're going into somebody else's local scene that they've never gone out of. They're like, oh, that band's from here. Oh, that's really cool. And then, you know, you develop a following from there. But then on top of that, the secondary bonus here is you get to like really experience other things. It gets you out of your comfort zone, and it really prepares you should the opportunity arise, because you never know. Like, what if you do it your way? And or you know, the way that you're talking about right now, not your way, but you know, and all of a sudden you go from this local thing, your music video gets 50 million views on it. You're getting calls left and right. We need you here. I want you to come to Europe. I want you to come to Japan or something like that. All of a sudden you're going from, oh, I played like 6 venues to, you want me to do what? Like you have to have that break-in period. So I don't know, it's just something to think about. But nowadays it's different.
Well, and I mean, we've talked about that a lot too, right? You know, a lot of it can come down to defining what the goal is, right? Like when I was 18, the goal was to get in a van and go fucking tour and spend 6 months out of the year playing shows or whatever. Like, I'm not 18 anymore. I'm 31 with a kid and a job that pays far more than any music job will probably ever realistically pay me, right? And it's just not feasible for me to do that kind of thing anymore. I don't really want to do that kind of thing anymore, you know? Like, if we're going to go on tour, I'm going to probably get some Airbnbs, because I'm not sleeping in a van, you know? Like, and that sounds shitty or whatever, but like, it's just my age, right? Like, so, you know, is that my goal now? Is that our end game? Like, no, like now, I think if I was going to say what I really wanted out of this, I want to play local shows that people show up to that are not just our family members and friends and part of the local scene, right? Like, I would love for a few people to be there that are like, hey, I fucking listen to this band all the time and I love them and I want to go see them because I love the band, not because, you know, the singer's, you know, my girlfriend's roommate or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that and maybe the occasional festival or something, right? Like, and you know, have maybe a decent amount of views or plays on Spotify, right? And those are middling goals, right? Maybe your goals are higher. To me, that in this particular landscape is achievable, you know, and I think it's something that's fine with us, right? Like, I don't want to be a touring record label band. Like, to me, that there's just not enough in it for me to want that. And I think it's fine to want that, right? And I think it's also fine to be the band that's like, hey, we're just going to be the band that plays once a month locally for our friends, right? Like, that's totally fine too, right? You put out records, you hang out with your buddies and you make music and do cool stuff, and nobody ever tells you that your shit sucks because it's just you and your friends making cool music or whatever. And maybe it does suck, or maybe it doesn't, or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're just having fun. right? Like there's just different levels to this. And I also think that the whole concept of like what it means to be a successful artist it's completely different at this point, right? Like, I mean, even the successful artists like really aren't making money off of it anymore anyway, right? So like I don't know, unless you're 18 and you're making no money and you want to make a little bit more than no money, I just don't really understand what the trajectory is anymore anyway, right? Like the goal isn't to be like discovered and put on a record label anymore. It's just not realistic, you know?
Yeah, I also think part of it's just that you're getting older.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the same boat. It's just like those aren't priorities to me. Like I don't want any of that. Like, you know, it's nice to play fun gigs. It's nice to play bigger gigs. It's nice to have a lot of people that I don't recognize. When we go out and play, that's my favorite part about it, is seeing people that I've never seen before in my life that I don't know, that don't know me, and then at the end of it, they'll come up, they want to talk. And I'm like, this is like, that's so cool. And I'm happy with that. Like, but I think what you said is very important, is establishing a goal. Whether or not goal is realistic or not is going to be totally, you know, it's up to you. I mean, whatever. But you have to have a goal with what you're doing. And what I like, and one of the reasons I think we've always gotten along over all these years, regardless of everything else, we have a very common goal with music. And that is that we want to be happy with what we make. And when we're not, it's not pretty. There's been some bad conversations, independent of, we've never worked together, but like independent of just like each other, just like talking about things that have been going on with bands that we're working with. And like, it's really frustrating, but at the end of the day, we just want to make stuff that we're proud of. And you know, that is what it is. Maybe somebody else wants to be the next, I don't know, who's even famous these days?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, it's just like, some people are famous. They're probably making shit for money. You know, honestly, it seems like the weirdest part about this is like YouTube seems like the safest, not safest, but like if you're looking at just like clear trajectories of people who are doing what they want to do and making money off of it, like it's the YouTubers who are doing it at this point, right? Like obviously there's a couple of guys, you know, that are off doing their own thing and they're making lots of money, but they're also working their asses off, right? Like they've got their, you know, hands in like 80 different pots. Like it's just, you know, it's crazy. That's what I mean. It's just like the version of success is like completely different now. So it's like, you know, I don't know, obviously as musicians, we have this fucking conversation all the time. Like, oh, like, you know, when we make it or whatever, but it's like, I don't know what that means anymore. You know, like it just doesn't mean you're not going to go play a bunch of shows and then have some A&R guy show up and be like, you know, just, oh, you're amazing, you're signed. And it's like, and then what?
Well, the other way of doing it, if you grew up in the 90s, you would know, you go and you take hostage of a radio station and you make them play it, and you have Brendan Fraser as your lead singer. That's all you need, and you're gonna be just fine. God, that guy made some great bad movies, but I don't know, Dave. I'm not going to sidetrack too far from that. I had a lot of fun with this. This was nice. It was nice to not talk about gear, honestly. It really was. And what's one thing it's been really refreshing just as a whole here, not always just talking about, you know, the other stuff. It's kind of getting a little bit boring and long in the tooth, so to speak, but that's not to say more of it's not inevitable. Make it a comment. I do want your opinions on the Ruby, but the reason I didn't want to go with that tonight is because I want to send some stuff over to you, because I have it coming DI'd out. I want to see if you hear a difference between the through output and the XLR output. They technically should be the same, but I feel like there's a major difference. But that's neither here nor there. You got anything else you want to add for tonight before we wrap this up?
No, just, you know, I hope people are getting something out of us rambling at each other about all of our crazy, weird music experiences that we've had over, you know, the years of doing this. Yeah, I mean, like if there's any kind of nuggets of help you can take out of things we've failed at, then this is successful. But no, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got.
Dave, you'd be really surprised. You'd be really surprised because I get really surprised sometimes. But some people really do find value in this, and I'm really happy that we can do that for you. If nothing else, it's just to entertain you if that's not the case. So thank you guys for checking this out. I'll see you tomorrow for another video. We're looking at the Jazzmaster from Japan. I'm going to be taking it apart because I have a few questions. I'm not sure about a few parts they used on it because I've never had it before. So that should be fun. But until then, hope you have a good rest of your day.